Broughan has 7 minutes.
And thanks for the opportunity to speak on this vitally important motion before us today. I'd like to warmly commend Deputy Clare Daly, of course, and her staff for bringing it forward. And the motion, which I've co-signed, notes the ill treatment of women and babies in religious and state-run institutions, the forced separation of single mothers and their babies from 1922 to 1998, the falsification of birth certs and the subsequent mistreatment of survivors by this state. And our motion, of course, further notes the dark stain that this abuse has left on our nation and the refusal of the state to give the survivors justice to the present day, despite irrefutable and conclusive evidence being submitted by survivors and their groups. Our motion, of course, calls on the government to introduce without delay a redress scheme for the survivors of the mother and baby institutions, so as to provide some comfort, Minister, for this ageing community, and to set up, of course, a commission of inquiry in relation to the very serious allegations emerging in recent times regarding the widespread and systematic falsification of birth certs. Last May, of course, the country was shocked when it was confirmed that St Patrick's Guild Adoption Agency illegally listed adoptive parents as birth parents between 1946 and 1969 in 126 cases. And as my colleague said, of course, the Irish Examiner had revealed evidence of these illegal registrations back in 2010, which led to the Adoption Authority of Ireland completing an audit and the Department of Children and Youth Affairs, of course, being notified in 2011. The review being undertaken by Marion Reynolds into this illegal practice was due, I believe, Minister, in October, last October, and this has been time frame has been extended a couple of times. The report, I think, was due in your office at your desk before Easter, and of course the second interim report was published at the end of January and complete at the end of November. But have you received the final report then yet, Minister? This review, of course, covers the period from 1953 to 1996, with the weighting of samples split between 1953 to 1976 and 1977 to 1996. But of the 30,000 records held by the Adoption Authority of Ireland, it identified 4,351 as relevant to the review. Just 459 of these were chosen as the sample, and TUSLA identified, I think, 70,000, and 1,082 of these were sampled, meaning that out of a possible 100,000 records, just 1,541 were actually being reviewed. The actual examination of these records, of course, was said in the second interim report to begin at the start of December 2018 and should have been completed by the end of March 2019, allowing Ms Reynolds to submit her final report to you, I think, before Easter. This time last month, Minister, you published a recommendation of the Collaborative Forum for Former Residents of Mother and Baby Homes and Related Institutions. Those recommendations, of course, include that a health and wellbeing supports package be developed, as my colleague has said, that the Adoption Information and Tracing Bill be amended, and that a memorialisation programme be put in place. Of course, we can't see the full list of recommendations, we're told, until after the Commission of Investigation itself completes its work. I welcome the ideas put forward for memorials, such as providing financial supports to the survivor-led groups for commemoration events each year, and the development, of course, of a national memorial. And we must never forget, indeed, what the state and church in this, very sectarian type state, which was established here in 1922, with I think 2 sectarian states on our island, unfortunately, Lascan, and what that the state and church did to women and children in the institutions where they were held. Of course, the full Commission investigation is not due to report until February 2020, but the 5th interim report was published in mid-April, and the report makes, of course, again, for grim reading, and again brings to the forefront the questions that have to be asked of the religious institutions involved, the politicians who were in power at the time, and the public representatives who were elected officials at the time in relevant local authorities. The finding of this 5th interim report show the main issues around burials, of course, in Bessborough and Tuam, and the report states, and I quote, that more than 900 children died in Bessborough or in hospital after being transferred from Bessborough. Despite very extensive inquiries and searches, the Commission has been able to establish the burial place of only 64 children. The report, of course, also asks on a number of occasions that the affidavits provided by some of the congregations involved were in many respects, and I quote, speculative, inaccurate and misleading, end quote. And the report also states, I quote, the Commission finds it very difficult to understand that no member of the congregation was able to say where the children who died in Bessborough are buried, end quote. And Bessborough House, of course, which was open from 1922 to 1998, transferred its records to the HSE in 2011, and TUSLA received the files in 2013, but the records don't contain information about burials, and more than 900 babies and children, of course, died in the home itself or in the Sacred Heart Maternity Hospital. And of course the Commission has also confirmed that informal adoptions were arranged from Bessborough through the Catholic Women's Aid Society, CWAS, but CWAS, and the report says, their records don't record where children who died in its care are buried. That's the end quote. The Commission was also able to establish that 1,343 babies and children died in the period 1922 and 1998, 771 in Bessborough, 552 in St Finbarr's Hospital, Cork, and 20 elsewhere. But has only been able to confirm, as I said, where 64 of these children were buried. And 92%, of course, of these children were born to public patients. There was much media coverage, of course, of the burial practices uncovered in Tuam, and people were understandably horrified and upset. So I won't reiterate, I know my colleague here beside me will be referring to some of those findings later on, but I won't reiterate the findings here, only to say that I would encourage anyone with information to contact the Commission before its final report. I must, however, briefly mention, Minister, the section in Galway County Council records and the lack of minutes from 1937 as outlined in section 8.14 of the report. The Children's Home in Tuam was owned by the local authority, and there is evidence that, and I quote, awareness of the possible existence of a burial ground in the grounds of the Tuam Children's Home dates in the 1970s, end quote. So it beggars belief the proper investigations were not undertaken at that time, and of course there was also a time when other institutions were in operation. As I said, the Sisters of Bon Secure, of course, continue to live and work in Tuam until 2001, and must have been aware of the building works which were carried out on the Children's Home site in the 1970s. And the Commission, of course, also considers that there must be people in Tuam and the surrounding areas who also knew more about the burial arrangements, but who haven't so far come forward. So, Minister, the matter of the illegal registration of adoptions as births, it itself needs a full Commission of inquiry. It's unacceptable that babies were allegedly taken from mothers in such circumstances, and that the truth may never have been known to the people involved. So I think, Minister, we can all agree now what went on in these mother and baby institutions following this report and the work of the Commission, and it's a dark stain on our history and the history of the state, and I believe those who suffered must be properly given justice and peace, and therefore I'll be strongly supporting the motion. Thanks again.